Greetings from Dallas, Texas. So if you didn't see my video last week I was in Houston, Texas, talked about my experiences there in that video. This week it's all about Dallas. So Dallas and Houston are only like 3 hours apart by car. They're not that far apart, but I have had a completely different experience in the two cities and I view them very different ways. Houston, I talked in that video about how I was just kind of underwhelmed by Houston as a city. With the gay dating stuff, I was impressed that there's a legitimate gay presence there. There's a legitimate gay neighborhood there. So that was cool to see. But I feel like Dallas is just more exciting and more dynamic. As soon as I stepped foot in Dallas, I went straight to a supermarket to pick up food. And even just there at the supermarket, I saw all this diversity, like racially, ethnically. There were clearly gay men there. There were clearly straight people there. I was like, all right, cool. This is an upgrade from Houston. I also happened to stay in the gay neighborhood here in Dallas called Oak Lawn. It was a total coincidence. Just like Houston, I wanted to pick the walkable, trendy, fun neighborhood that has bars, restaurants, and that kind of thing. Because when I travel, I'm such a New Yorker at heart that I don't want to rent a car. I don't want to have to take an Uber everywhere. I want to be where the action is. And here, just like Houston, that happens to be the gay neighborhood. So it's perfect, kill two birds with one stone. So just like Montrose in Houston, I would say here the gay neighborhood is a legitimate gay neighborhood. Sometimes places will say they're a gay neighborhood or gay friendly, and you're where? I don't understand. Having one gay bar or gay owned establishment doesn't suddenly make a gay neighborhood. Oak Lawn is legitimately a gay neighborhood. There's no confusion around it. There's a ton of gay bars, the rainbow flags, and just signs kind of all around that you're in a gay friendly place. Now, when it comes to gay dating, on the apps, I've never had so many men super tall. I'm not talking just 6 feet tall. I'm talking 6'5", 6'10", reach out to me. And I'm what is this altered state of Dallas? Who are these people? What? I feel I'm in Avatar, the movie Avatar. And just like Houston, I was pleasantly surprised by how many guys, the sheer amount of guys there are on apps like Tinder. You know, sometimes you go to a city and you go through everybody in 20 minutes and you're wow. What's also really interesting is that since I've gotten here, I would say most of the guys who have responded or who have reached out to me have been Black men. And I was talking to a guy here who is Black about this, and he was well, here, you're exotic to us because we don't really see Mediterranean guys that often. And I thought that was really interesting. Finally, let's talk about the gay bars. So I had a few people recommend to me the Roundup Saloon. So I was I have to go. Plus, I vaguely remembered it from an episode of The Real Housewives of Dallas. So I started there, and it was the most amazing bar I've been to in so long. It was just such a novelty. It was Twilight Zone. As soon as I walk in, I saw guys who looked straight up cowboys out of a movie. The hat, the boots, the flannel, just that aesthetic. And then there were guys like me, just yuppies, city yuppies, whatever you want to call them. And I was pleasantly surprised by how many attractive guys there were. And again, there was such diversity that it was cool to see. But now what makes the Roundup Saloon even more special is just how Texan it is. So there's a dance floor in the middle. It's it might be the biggest gay bar I've ever been to. It's maybe, I would say it's bigger than Twist in Miami, which before that I think was probably the biggest gay bar I've ever been to. The Roundup has this big dance floor, and people they're line dancing. They're doing the traditional Southern Texan dance. It's so entertaining to watch because it's just it's something you would never see in New York City or Miami or LA where I've lived before, or any other city where I visited. It was just such a Texan moment, and it's fun. It's cool to see people just do this traditional thing, and it's not, it's not trashy, it's not slutty, it's nice to see. It was just the novelty of it was exciting for me to see, just this different vibe of a gay bar. So on that same street, there's a bunch of other bars, which again, of course, is great when everything's in walkable distance. I went to this other place called Station 4 that a few people also told me to go to, that I felt was more sort of trashy. Like there were a bunch of stripper poles, which is fine, but it felt more clubby, whereas I prefer a bar. And that's what was cool about the Roundup Saloon. It felt like a gay version of like an old school saloon or like a country bar, I guess. And one thing I noticed here too, just like Houston, is that in general the guys that I spoke to on apps were so much more polite and respectful and like just likable in talking to them, like conversationalists. And so going to these bars and there's just like a fun, lighthearted energy, and then talking to these guys on apps who are friendly and stuff. It's interesting because yet again I'm like, I don't know that I could live here as a city. Like I wasn't stimulated. It was better than Houston, but these are still very much like what I would call like industrial cities. They're very much car cities where everything's spread out, kind of like Los Angeles. And those just aren't really this kind of cities I prefer. Like I prefer a more old school metropolis, like a New York City, right? Or a Boston, or if we're talking about Europe, like a Rome, a Paris. That's what I prefer. So in terms of like the lifestyle, I don't know if I would see myself living in a place like Dallas, but it's really refreshing to be in a place where gay dating seems, and just like living as a gay person seems great. And it's funny that there's always this, it seems like it's always you have to pick one or the other, right? It's either like people are more genuine, it's easier to have like a community, but you're not necessarily, the setting isn't necessarily what you want. Like I love living in Miami. I love waking up to tropical birds and the weather's amazing all year round. I walk to the beach, I walk everywhere. And if I want to go to this city, there's also like an urban part of Miami. But in Miami, I've gotten so used to like the coldness, not even the coldness, but just the abruptness of people and like, it seems like every other person's like on drugs half the time. A place like Dallas or Houston, I feel like people live here and they settle here. Whereas all the other cities that I've lived, like Miami, LA, New York, they're very transient cities. Like people get up and go, they're moving in, they're moving out. But I would definitely come back to Dallas. I was only here for like, I think 5 nights. I would definitely come back and want to like explore further and explore Texas further. I don't have the best memories of Austin, but everybody I've talked to has been like, Austin's the best city out of the three. So I feel like I might at some point have to return and check it out again. But I'm curious if any of you guys have ever been to Texas, and if so, what your observations and your thoughts were.